Assalamu alaikum, comrades. I hope everyone is doing okay in this heightened time of a lot of feelings. One of the most atrocious things I've seen in the past couple of days are posts on social media about women, specifically Ukrainian women. You might have seen this post from Cornhub. There's also this post that's been circulating on Greek social media that a follower of mine translated for me. In essence, it expresses how excited men are that the new wave of immigrants will be women that they basically view as sex objects. Some even going so far as to say it'll be a nice change from the usual immigrants that they get. Pleasant, right? And of course, it's bad enough that in a time of war and crisis, not only are these women being sexualized, but so is their pain and suffering. And it got me thinking a lot about another issue that I want to talk about, because this sort of stigmatization of Eastern European or Slavic women isn't anything new. And surprise, surprise, it all leads back to the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union gave women monumental rights for the time. The early days were full of experimentation with new ideas, a new image for women, and new expectations, those that are equal to men. In fact, the Soviet Constitution from the very beginning stated this: women in the USSR are accorded equal rights with men in all spheres of economic, state, cultural, social, and political life. Louise Strong, one of the first Americans to visit many parts of the Soviet Union, published this booklet in the 1920s labeled Marriage and Morals in the Soviet Union, where she features a lot of interesting accounts of what she was seeing at the time. One point that she mentioned that I didn't know about until recently was on illegitimate children. Let me read you what the new laws in the Soviet Union were in regards to illegitimate children. Anna wrote, "There is no illegitimate children. Any woman about to have a child can file a statement regarding the father 3 months prior to birth. The supposed father is then informed, and if he does not within 2 weeks deny it, he is assumed to accept the support of the child. If the case comes to court, these cases have precedence over all others, so that the woman may not be kept waiting. Parents' rights over children exist only for the good of the children. Mothers and fathers have equal rights. If the father wants the child to enter the komsomol and the mother doesn't, who decides? Not as in the past, the husband by beating the wife, but it comes to court. If the case is serious, a judge will decide." This is 1927. Another really interesting thing that Louise Strong wrote about that I want to highlight is how they dealt with old traditions, be that in rural Russia or in other people groups with long-standing cultural ties and traditions. How did they address it? So let me read this to you, because it's just really fascinating, and I don't see a lot of people talking about this. So Anna writes, "Even the compulsion of old tradition is fought whenever possible." But what does she mean by fought? It's really not as aggressive as it sounds. "A young girl of Tartar family told me her love tale. Her married sister died, and according to tribal custom, the bereaved husband proceeded to take to wife the younger sister. The girl did not like him, but was very young and without will to oppose her parental and tribal pressures. When she came before the registration officer, she was 3 times asked, 'Are you sure you want to do this of your own free will? Are you sure you want this man?' Remember, no ancient custom has power to compel your marriage now in the Soviet Union, unless it is of your own free choice." Intimidated by the surrounding relatives, the girl stammered that it was her free choice, and the registration officer completed the formalities. But that night, the girl found the relation impossible. For several nights, the husband, unwilling to face the shame of open rejection, continued to woo her with self-control and consideration. At last, finding that she could not bring herself to accept him, she fled from his roof and got a divorce without further ado from a registration officer who told her simply, "I knew you'd be coming back." So again, some insight how if they wanted to maintain these traditions, they were totally allowed to. She went to the city to school and met a young student of her own race, Tatar, by whom she had a child. He wished to marry her, but lacked her energy of will to oppose his parents, who considered it a shame to take her into the family, not because she had yielded their son without marriage, but because by tribal custom she belonged to her dead sister's husband. After living for 3 or 4 years with this man and finding him too weak-willed to complete the marriage, she left him and married a Russian. In all this story, there is nothing which the girl should be afraid to have known among any friends she may make in the city. None of it is regarded today as a disgrace in Russia, in 1927. If she apologizes for any part of it, it is for the lack of willpower which led her into the first contract and humiliated her husband, and that, of course, she and others excuse on the grounds of inexperience and youth. Isn't that just insightful of the times? Coming up is Women's Day on March 8th, once a political holiday where women were celebrated and given awards. Today, it's become more of a commercial holiday where women are gifted flowers and chocolates, and sometimes, these days, though it is a holiday in which people have the day off in all former Soviet republics, unfortunately, a lot of the times, women are forced to cook, clean, and prepare a celebration on Women's Day and take care of everything. So is it, really a day off? A lot of people like to argue that in the Soviet Union, this was also the case, that women both had a job at home as the cook and cleaner and a job, for instance, in a factory. While this may be the case sometimes on an individual level, men were heavily encouraged and pressured into taking up their fair share of household work. The idea of men's and women's chores and jobs wasn't the same as we perceive it today or in the Western world, so it's really hard to apply that. And then, of course, after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, a lot of things changed. Really, starting in Glasnost era is when things started to go downhill, but ultimately, after the dissolution, things just got way worse. So what happened exactly? How did things change so drastically? Why today, in the Western world, do we perceive Slavic and Eastern European women as these over-sexualized beings? Why are they depicted as such in media, in cartoons? Maybe you've seen illustrations like this. The stereotype of a mail-ordered bride, heightened sex tourism in these places, and even worse, human trafficking. This publication by Gail Kligman said that the collapse of communism catapulted the former socialist countries into the global economy. The availability of cheap labor in potential markets brought multinational corporations, banks, and manufacturers to the region. Directors of pornographic films and magazines, as well as international sex tourism agencies, also flocked to the former socialist states, where there was then little threat of institutional regulation or enforcement. The Human Rights Review on Human Trafficking in Russia and Other Post-Soviet States from 2010 also states that every year between 20 and 60,000 Russian women become victims of traffickers, and no less than 500,000 at that time have been trafficked from the country since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Russia has become one of the largest exporters of women for the sex industry. And while I can't quite find any statistics for during Soviet times, one could imagine with how strict they were on documents and their borders, not much left without notice. It is indeed Moldova, a former Soviet republic, that holds the highest rate of human trafficking, something completely new to the region following the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The fault here is really capitalism. Of course it is. People taking advantage of these young women's newfound financial instability. When the Soviet Union collapsed, many people lost their entire fortune overnight. They no longer had an income, some no longer had a place to stay. And what does that lead to some of the time? Desperate times, desperate measures. And over time, those desperate measures become stereotypes, and they are happily taken advantage of by men of the West. The following clip I'm going to show you, truly viewer discretion is advised, as you might find what these children say to be quite uncomfortable.
11. То есть ты нюхаешь с 8 лет?
Да.
А среди девчонок проститутки есть?
Да, там их много.
Со скольки лет?
С 13 до 16. В 16 они уже 13-14 они сосут.
Как ты зарабатываешь?
Половым способом.
И сколько лет ты этим? Таким образом?
9.
С 9? А много девчонок зарабатывает таким же образом?
Все.
Ты зарабатываешь проституцией?
Нет, почему?
А как это называется?
Ну так-то да.
Как-то да. То есть ты занимаешься разнообразными делами с мужиками?
Нет, не разнообразными.
То есть ты занимаешься тем, что ты...
Ну, я...
Как это называется?
Миньет. Да.
Зарабатывают таким образом только девчонки или мальчишки тоже?
Мальчишки тоже. И Гена есть. Он в попу дает.
Много таких мальчишек здесь?
Нормально.
Now, that video was filmed after the fall of the Soviet Union, and while things have changed a little bit, as I mentioned, those stereotypes have truly stuck. And we see this now, even in an extreme time of people seeking stability during war. There's also TV shows like 90 Day Fiancé that continue to perpetuate these negative stereotypes of the overly sexualized Eastern European woman only out here for money. Can you blame those women who are on mail-ordered bride sites? What do you think started the demand? Women needing food and shelter and stability, and men desperate and disgusting enough to take advantage of women in those situations. TV shows like 90 Day Fiancé only aid in helping people justify their gross behavior by saying, well, she's just a gold digger. Why did she need to dig said gold? Would she have needed to if the Soviet Union was still around and all of these people had stability and income and work? If they hadn't been brainwashed by capitalistic propaganda that now flows throughout the former Soviet Union and is idolized and romanticized by these people even. Even in my own life, when people find out of my ancestry and where my family is from, I often get gross comments of, well, I've always wanted to be with a Serbian girl, or, Eastern European, despite, my ethnic background being Danube or Banat Swabian, a Germanic minority in Eastern Europe, not a Slavic one. That doesn't matter. They hear Eastern European woman and they automatically sexualize it, regardless of the correct ethnographic information. I've heard horror stories from places like Romania, where women can't even be sure that their own boyfriends are not going to traffic them. Many instances of dating men for weeks, sometimes months, only to go on a couple's trip and realize that they're being sold, sometimes never seen again. The financial instability of the people of these places not only affects those women who are directly forced into things like trafficking, but it even makes the men take advantage of their own women in that way as well. And so in this time, as I see searches on questionable websites for specifically women currently going through conflict in Eastern Europe, well, I'm not surprised. I'm very saddened by it and by the lack of outrage over it. Hopefully, these stereotypes ingrained in us since the fall of the Soviet Union has not made us insensitive towards these harsh realities. And I hope, comrades, that you stand up for your sisters who are being taken advantage of and sexualized in this time. It's not okay, and we can all blame capitalism for it in the end. And that I think a lot of people can get behind, at the very least. I also want to add that while this primarily focuses on the over-sexualization of Eastern European women, it's important to note that that is one of the only acceptable ways to represent them. If they are not being sexualized, in which they are at least slightly tolerable, then they are being depicted as thieves or in the mob or some sort of spy. And so unfortunately, that sexualization is actually the most positive option in representation. Just something to think about. It doesn't make it okay, but it's the lesser evil of sorts. The most positive depiction they can manage of us. Anyways, I hope you're all doing okay out there. I know we're all in a heightened sense of anxiety and feelings, and who knows what will come to light in the coming weeks. But please use your brain, be inspired by history, and consider supporting me here by subscribing to my YouTube channel, following me on Instagram or TikTok, and perhaps becoming a patron of mine. All right, I hope you have a great day, a great week, and I hope no one close to you is suffering too much due to everything out in the world. Goodbye.